Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought I would find myself telling this story, but sometimes life takes turns we could never imagine. It started in a way that felt innocent enough, moments that looked ordinary on the surface, but carried something deeper underneath. I had always been careful, always conscious of lines that should never be crossed, but when temptation crept in, I realized those lines are not always as clear as we'd like to believe. The house felt different that summer, quieter than usual. My stepson had just turned 21, and for the first time, I began to notice him not as the boy I'd known for years, but as a grown man. He was respectful, thoughtful, and carried himself with a confidence that surprised me. It made me curious in ways I didn't want to admit. You know how sometimes a simple smile or a fleeting glance can spark something you try to ignore. That's how it began, with something small, something I brushed off at first. I told myself it was nothing. Just imagination. Just a passing thought. But as the days went by, little moments began to stack up. He would linger a bit longer in conversation, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that felt almost too much. There were evenings when we'd sit together, just talking about life, and I'd catch myself forgetting that he wasn't just a friend, but family. That realization should have stopped me right there, but instead it pulled me in closer. The truth is, attraction doesn't always happen where we expect it. Sometimes it sneaks into places it shouldn't. I felt guilty for noticing him, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the warmth in my chest when he laughed, or the way my stomach fluttered when he looked at me like he understood something no one else did. Have you ever had a moment where your heart wanted one thing, but your mind screamed for you to walk away? That's the place I found myself in, caught between reason and desire. One night, when the house was quiet, we ended up in the kitchen at the same time. It was late, the kind of late where conversations feel heavier and secrets seem easier to share. He leaned against the counter, asking me questions about love, about choices, about regrets. His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes that made it hard for me to breathe. It felt like he was asking me more than what his words carried. It felt like he was asking me to admit the unspoken. I should have turned away, but I didn't. And in that silence between us, something shifted. A line I never thought I would cross suddenly felt so close, so fragile, like one step would shatter everything we knew. That step was waiting, hanging in the air, and I knew once it was taken, nothing could ever go back to the way it was. I couldn't sleep that night after what happened in the kitchen. My mind replayed every second, the way his eyes held mine, the way the silence felt louder than any words we could have spoken. It was dangerous, and yet there was a part of me that didn't want the feeling to go away. The more I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, the more real it became. Something had shifted between us, and no matter how much I wanted to deny it, I knew he felt it too. The next morning, everything looked the same on the outside. The sun was shining through the windows, the coffee was brewing, and life went on as if nothing had happened. But inside, I felt different. Every time he walked into the room, my heart raced just a little faster. I found myself noticing small things: his smile when he teased me, the way he held the door open, or the sound of his footsteps as he moved around the house. They were details I never used to think twice about, but now they meant something more. I started asking myself when this change began. Maybe it was during those long conversations we had when everyone else was asleep, or maybe it was the afternoons when we found ourselves laughing at the same jokes. He was 21, no longer the boy I once helped with homework or reminded to finish his chores. He was a man now, one with his own thoughts, feelings, and presence that was hard to ignore. That realization made me both uneasy and drawn to him at the same time. There were moments when I caught him watching me too, as if he was waiting for me to say something neither of us could put into words. At dinner, I'd look up and find his eyes lingering just a little too long. When our hands brushed by accident, he didn't pull away quickly like most people would. Instead, he let the moment breathe, as if testing the waters. Every gesture felt loaded. Every word carried a weight I couldn't explain. I tried to distract myself, telling myself it was just my imagination. I threw myself into chores, errands, anything to keep my mind busy. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the quiet pull between us. It was like a current, subtle but steady, and the harder I tried to resist it, the stronger it seemed to grow. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about attraction. It was about connection. He listened to me in a way that few people ever had. He noticed when I was tired, when I was distracted, even when I was pretending to be fine. That kind of attention is rare, and once you feel it, it's impossible to forget. Still, I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move could change everything. Families aren't meant to carry secrets like this. But every day, the unspoken tension between us grew heavier, and pretending it wasn't there only made it worse. One evening, as I stood on the porch watching the sunset, he came out to join me. The air was warm, and the sky was painted with colors that seemed too beautiful to belong to reality. We stood side by side without speaking, but the silence said enough. I could feel him near me, close enough that if I turned, our shoulders would touch. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer something I could ignore. The days that followed felt like I was walking on a tightrope. On the surface, everything looked normal, but inside, every moment carried a weight I couldn't put into words. My stepson and I continued to live our daily routines, me cooking meals, him running errands, both of us exchanging casual conversations, but beneath it all, there was a constant hum of tension, like static in the air. I could feel it when he walked into a room, when our eyes met across the table, or even when we were both silent. The conflict inside me grew stronger each day. Part of me wanted to run from these feelings, to shut them down before they became too powerful to handle. But another part of me longed for the connection we had been building in those quiet late-night talks and unspoken moments. It was more than attraction. It was as if he had become the one person who truly saw me, the one who noticed when I was lost in thought or holding back my emotions. That made it even harder to distance myself. One evening, I found myself watching him from the doorway as he worked on fixing something in the living room. He looked focused, his sleeves rolled up, his movements calm and steady. It was such a simple thing, but my heart caught in my chest. I realized then that I wasn't just drawn to him, I admired him. That admiration scared me, because it meant my feelings were deeper than I had admitted, and once feelings cross that line, they are almost impossible to ignore. At the same time, I started to notice how he treated me differently than he treated others. He was protective in ways that felt subtle but meaningful. If I was carrying something heavy, he'd step in without hesitation. If I seemed upset, he would check on me quietly, without making it obvious. Those small gestures might seem ordinary to anyone else, but to me, they felt like signs that he was feeling something too. Still, the fear of what could happen if anyone discovered our closeness never left my mind. Families are built on trust, and if that trust broke, the damage would be permanent. I worried about whispers, judgments, and the possibility of losing the very bond we had. That fear held me back, even when my heart wanted to step forward. The real conflict wasn't just between us, it was inside me. Was I willing to risk everything for something that might not last? Or was I strong enough to walk away before it went too far? And what if he felt the same? What if he was waiting for me to make the first move? One night, when the house was quiet again, we found ourselves in the same room. He was sitting with his phone in hand, but his eyes lifted the second I walked in. There was a pause, a moment where time seemed to slow, and I felt the weight of every unspoken word between us. I wanted to break the silence, but I didn't know what to say. Should I tell him the truth? Should I pretend nothing existed? It's strange how silence can be louder than words. That night, I left the room before I could make a mistake, but the look in his eyes followed me. It was a look that told me he knew exactly what I was feeling. The tension had reached a point where it was impossible to ignore. Every day felt heavier, every glance carried more meaning than it should. I tried to convince myself that I could keep things under control, but the truth was, I was already too deep. He wasn't just my stepson anymore. He was the person I thought about when I woke up and the last thought in my mind before I fell asleep. There were nights when I would lie awake, listening to the quiet of the house, wondering if he was awake too, feeling the same restlessness I did. The silence seemed almost alive, pressing against me, daring me to act. I'd ask myself questions I couldn't answer. Was this love, or was it just desire? Was I risking everything for a fleeting moment, or was this the beginning of something real? The suspense grew worse when little moments began to feel like turning points. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, his hand brushed against mine. It should have been nothing, just an accident, but the way neither of us moved away made it feel like everything. For a split second, we stood frozen, the air thick with something we both understood but refused to name. Then he smiled, soft and knowing, and I had to look away before my heart gave me away. The conflict only grew when others started noticing how close we had become. Friends would joke about how well we got along, how easy our conversations seemed. Their words were casual, innocent, but they made me nervous. If people could see the connection, how long before they guessed the truth? That fear made me more cautious, but it didn't stop the pull between us. One late night, it finally came to a breaking point. I found him on the porch, sitting alone, staring out into the dark. Something about the way he sat there, so quiet and thoughtful, made me walk over. We didn't say much at first. The silence stretched, and the only sound was the faint breeze moving through the trees. Then, slowly, he turned to me, his eyes searching mine, and I knew. He didn't have to speak. Everything we had been holding back was right there in that moment, too powerful to hide anymore. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I knew if either of us made a move, there would be no going back. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing one step would change everything. The night on the porch should have been enough to force me to make a choice, but instead it opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through or close. His eyes had spoken everything we had both been too afraid to say, and in that silence I felt the world tilt. But just as I thought the tension between us couldn't grow any stronger, something happened that complicated everything even more. The next week, an unexpected visitor arrived, his father. It wasn't unusual for him to stop by, but the timing couldn't have been worse. Suddenly the house, which had been filled with quiet stolen moments and unspoken emotions, felt crowded with eyes that could see too much. I caught myself flinching every time his father looked at me, terrified that he might notice the shift in my behavior. Did I linger too long when I spoke to his son? Did my voice sound different? The fear of being discovered wrapped itself around me like a shadow. What made it worse was how my stepson reacted. Around his father, he was careful, guarded, but when our eyes met across the room, there was a spark of something rebellious, like he knew we were playing with fire and didn't care who might get burned. That spark both thrilled and terrified me. It was one thing to feel tension when we were alone, but to feel it while someone else was in the room made everything more dangerous. Late one evening, after his father had gone to bed, my stepson lingered in the kitchen. I went in to grab a glass of water, and there he was, waiting almost like he knew I'd come. We didn't speak, but the silence was filled with everything we couldn't say. The risk was higher now, but the pull between us was stronger too. It was in the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. That was the second twist I hadn't expected. The more impossible our situation became, the more undeniable the feelings grew. It wasn't fading like I had hoped, it was escalating. Each day felt like a countdown to something inevitable, something that would either bring us together or tear everything apart. The conflict was no longer just about us. It was about the walls closing in, the fear of being caught, and the danger of secrets growing too heavy to carry. Even small conversations turned into a gamble. If his father noticed how often we laughed at the same things or how our silences stretched too long, what would happen then? Would everything come crashing down? One night, when I thought I could handle the pressure no longer, I went outside to clear my head. The stars were bright, the air still, but my mind was restless. That's when I heard the door creak behind me, and he stepped out. His expression was serious, more serious than I'd ever seen. For a moment, I thought he was finally going to speak the words we had been avoiding. Instead, he whispered something that shook me. He wasn't planning to hold back anymore. Those words were the spark that turned quiet longing into something dangerous and unstoppable. I felt my breath catch, because in that instant, I realized the choice might not be mine to make anymore. He had made his. The night he told me he wasn't planning to hold back anymore was the night everything finally came to a head. I felt my chest tighten as the weight of his words sank in. For weeks, maybe months, we had been living in this fragile bubble of silence, each moment charged with unspoken emotions. Now, there was no more pretending. The choice I had been avoiding was suddenly staring me in the face, and I knew we had reached the point of no return. We stood there under the stars, the world around us so still that it felt like time itself had paused. His eyes never left mine, steady and unafraid, while I fought the war inside my own heart. Part of me wanted to pull away, to end it before we destroyed everything, but another part of me longed for the very thing he was offering, a connection that had become too strong to deny. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until I finally whispered the words I had been too afraid to say. I felt the same. The relief in his face was instant, but so was the fear in mine. Because the truth, once spoken, can never be taken back. From that moment on, there was no more hiding, no more excuses. We had crossed the line completely, and nothing would ever look the same again. The thrill of it rushed through me, but so did the dread of what came next. For a while, it felt like we were walking through fire, knowing it would burn but unable to stop. The tension that had lived between us for so long finally exploded into honesty, and it was both terrifying and liberating. I had chosen to follow my heart, even though every rule, every reason told me not to. That was the climax, the moment where love, risk, and desire collided in a way that could no longer be ignored. But just as I thought I had finally made peace with my choice, the unexpected twist arrived. The very next morning, his father announced plans that none of us had seen coming. He wanted the three of us to move in together, to start fresh as a closer family. My breath caught in my throat. Suddenly, the secret we had shared under the cover of night would be forced into the bright light of day, with no space, no distance, no way to escape. That revelation turned our secret into a ticking clock. Every choice from here on out would carry consequences we couldn't avoid. And while we had finally admitted our truth to each other, the real question was whether the world, and the people closest to us, could ever accept it. The moment his father announced that we would all be moving in together felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath me. What was once a fragile secret between two people was suddenly trapped in a situation where there would be no room to hide. For days, I felt my nerves unravel, wondering how long we could keep everything buried before the truth surfaced. And yet, in the middle of that fear, there was also a strange sense of clarity. We had reached the climax, and now it was time to face what came next. My stepson and I made an unspoken pact. We pulled back, at least on the outside, choosing caution over risk. Around his father, we acted as if nothing had changed, keeping our conversations light, our silences shorter, our eyes careful not to linger too long. It was exhausting, pretending to be less than what we were, but it was necessary. Secrets are heavy, and though we carried ours quietly, the bond between us had already been sealed. Over time, I began to notice something important. The intensity that had once consumed us slowly shifted into something calmer, something deeper. It wasn't just about stolen glances or unspoken words anymore. It was about trust, understanding, and patience. We had crossed a dangerous line, yes, but what remained wasn't chaos. It was a kind of quiet love that existed even when nothing was said. The subplot of living under one roof brought its own challenges. His father's presence was a constant reminder of what we risked, and yet it also forced me to reflect on choices and consequences. I asked myself hard questions. Was this love strong enough to last, or was it simply a storm we had mistaken for something permanent? The answer wasn't simple, but it became clearer with time. Sometimes love doesn't arrive where we expect it, and sometimes the greatest challenge is learning how to live with what our hearts already know. In the end, the story didn't end with fireworks or dramatic confessions. Instead, it ended in something quieter but more real, a decision to carry the truth carefully, to value the connection we shared while also protecting the people around us. We didn't need to label it or announce it to the world. What mattered was that, in the silence between us, we both knew the story wasn't really ending. It was simply changing into something new. So I'll leave you with this reflection. Love is complicated. It doesn't always fit into neat boxes or follow rules. Sometimes it challenges everything we think we know about loyalty, family, and desire. And when that happens, We're left with choices that test who we are at our core. What do you think about the ending? Do you believe love like this should be embraced or left behind? Would you want to see a sequel exploring what happens next? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this. Summary: this story follows a forbidden romance filled with tension, longing, and impossible choices. What begins as small, unspoken moments between a woman and her stepson evolves into a powerful connection that challenges boundaries, risks discovery, and forces them to question what love truly means. The climax pushes them to the edge of exposure, and the resolution reveals how they learn to carry their truth in silence while protecting those around them. It's a tale of desire, restraint, and the complexities of relationships. E11.